I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Sakpal Tan. I am the National Program Director for the National Pancreas Foundation. Thank you for joining us today in today's Lunch and Learn on recruitment and retention in clinical trials. The mission of the NPF is to provide hope for those suffering from pancreatitis and pancreatic cancer through funding cutting-edge research, advocating for new and better therapies, and providing support and education for patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals. We have awarded over 5 million grants in our 28-year tenure, endorsed over 185 centers of excellence, and we have over 30 programs for patients and physicians. We have chapters all across the nation. Chapters are a great way for patients and families to connect with each other and NPF centers in their areas. Our annual fundraising event is Pancreas Bowl. If you want to get involved, please contact our volunteer and development coordinator, Cheyenne. We also have galas across the nation as well. Our most recent one is this one this weekend in Pittsburgh, PA. Our 20th Annual Fellow Symposium is our signature event for providers. It's a free CME event for fellows where they can find mentors, collaborate with each other on research, and listen to world-renowned speakers talk on various pancreas disease topics. I would encourage you to let your fellows know about it. We take GI, oncology, postdocs, surgery fellows, anybody that wants to learn more about pancreas disease. And I would say that the deadline is a little bit earlier this year since the fellow symposium is a little earlier next year. A lot of what we do is free for patients and healthcare providers, and we want to keep providing these programs and need the help of our supporters. We encourage you to find creative ways to fundraise for the NPF, and you can use this QR code. We also have a medical providers portal where you'll find CME and non-CME webinars, updates on NPF programs, grant opportunities, pancreas conferences from centers of excellence. We are also excited to announce that we have a new program geared towards APPs coming up for 2026, so stay tuned for that. And then follow us on all our socials. We post once a day. And then these are our upcoming Lunch and Learn webinars. In 2 weeks, we have Navigating the Challenges and Understanding the Complications in Chronic Pancreatitis. And then on November 7th, we have a webinar on AI and pancreas cancer. It is INAV and pancreas cancer, transforming screening and treatment planning. INAV was actually voted one of Time's best inventions in 2024. And so our featured speakers are going to be Dr. Wungki Park. Dr. Park is a medical oncologist and physician scientist who specializes in caring for people with cancers of the pancreas and bile system. In the lab at David M. Rubenstein Center for Pancreatic Cancer Excellence, or Pancreatic Cancer Research, his research focuses on the resistance mechanisms to immunotherapy, tumor microenvironment, DNA damage, repair, and KRAS. Dr. Zev Wainberg is a professor of medicine at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA and a researcher in the UCLA Health Johnson Comprehensive Cancer Center, where he leads clinical trials across GI cancers, including pancreas, colon, gastric, and esophageal. His laboratory research focused on testing novel therapies for these cancers, with recent work published in Nature Medicine on ELI-0022P, a vaccine targeting the KRAS mutation. There will be also a post-webinar email with links to watch and this webinar and an audio version as well, along with NPF resources that will be provided later today. And thank you to our sponsor, Arcus Biosciences. And this is a webinar for you to complete after. Great. And I give it the floor to Dr. Wainberg and Dr. Park now. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Really great to be here. I'm happy to be introducing this topic. I think that one of the importances of groups like the National Pancreas Foundation is to promote good, credible scientific research, and they do a great job. So I want to thank them for certainly hosting us today and allowing us the opportunity to speak to this audience. We're going to be talking a little bit about challenges of clinical trials. We all know as practitioners that it's not easy to recruit, it's not easy to retain. We're going to talk about some of the evidence-based strategies that are helpful. We're also going to talk about the importance of these trials and helping move the field forward. Um, so to get us started, I think we'll have a little discussion. First, we'll ask Dr. Park to introduce himself briefly to the group.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much, Dr. Weinberg. This is my honor and very exciting to join this webinar. I think will be a very interesting topic for practical standpoints and for us to move the needle together. And, research is so much needed in pancreas cancer, and patients will participate better and we can conduct our clinical trials so we do our better job to help them back again. So hopefully we can touch upon some of the important topics today.
Okay, so let's get started and talk about what are some of the barriers that we face, and I think we have to consider the fact that both Dr. Park and I practice in major urban metropolitan centers. So some of our barriers are probably different than some of the barriers that other providers face. But we have some tips, I suppose, at how we've learned. So I'm going to ask Dr. Park if you can start us off focusing a little bit on some of the barriers that your institution has faced in recruiting patients.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So I think the most common barriers we have, I can highlight three. I can just think top of my head. The first is probably the access problem, really. Even at, our centers, like the major centers in the urban setting, we don't really always have open trials enough. And so the patients may travel only to find no available option. It can be very challenging. Um, the awareness and the timing is very, very important. Trial concepts, take time to explain, and also it takes a lot of team members, coordinators, and the clinical trial nurses to go into the room and explain to them. So that takes a lot of time. And pancreas cancer, as you know, has a lot of aggressive features at the time of diagnosis without the treatment. So moving fast and trying to identify trials will be probably the most important thing. So, having the awareness is important, and, understanding the clinical context is also very important. So when we accrue these patients, I think it's really, really complex issue. It's more challenging than other disease types because of the aggressive features of this particular disease. So I think those three are
Yeah,
the
those are, I mean, just to highlight, to hone in on some of these, because it's really interesting, right? We find ourselves in this unique moment in pancreatic cancer where we have these drugs right now. Let's talk a bit about that. KRAS inhibitors, right? They're first and foremost when I get referred a patient with pancreatic cancer, that's what they're asking for, and I'm sure to your group as well, Dr. Park. And the reality is that until these drugs are approved, which we hope will happen in the next year or two, we have so many patients who are eligible for these drugs, yet not enough slots. And at least in our center, even though we have 3 or 4 KRAS inhibitors open for pancreatic cancer, there's still not enough slots and for the patients who want to participate. And one of the reasons is, as I'm sure you've seen, is that some of the drugs are feeling that they should, the sponsors start moving their drugs up front to combine with chemotherapy. So now the typical patient who's received chemotherapy is no longer eligible. And so that is challenging, and it's challenging. And I think um, I it's one of the unique challenges that we find right now in pancreatic cancer. And I'm sure you have the same problem. We have more patients than we have slots, and we need better industry participation, I think, to fix this problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. The, who would have ever thought being an oncologist would take care of pancreas cancers and focus so much on such a hard, difficult to treat disease. This is a really prime time, we're about to see a lot of, whole landscape changing. Therefore, there's a lot of competition between the companies, and everyone wants to jump into the biggest pie, meaning the first line and untreated setting. So that leaves out a lot of majority of patients who are actually fit and well and ready to be on the trial, but we just don't have enough spots. So it's almost heartbreaking. In
Yeah.
every clinic, we just don't have enough option to
Yeah.
offer.
I
So,
agree. It's been the double-edged sword right now is that we have actually active drugs, we think, with these KRAS inhibitors, right? We're seeing good responses anecdotally. Some of the data is percolating. It's becoming aware to our patients that these are the drugs that patients want to get on, primarily these and others as well. And yet we don't have enough slots. So I think one of the goals that we should have as a field is how to make that better. Because we can't have patients sitting on waiting lists by the dozens and hundreds. It's not the right thing for patients. But moving on, I wonder if you could talk about, we all live in large metropolitan areas, so we certainly have, you know, diverse patient populations. Are there some other barriers to recruitment that you found in New York City, for example?
yes, sure. I mean, just like where you are at in LA, New York is also a melting pot, and there's, a wide range of different socioeconomic backgrounds, and financial, cultural, and language needs are just as decisive and as the medical aspects. And so I think it's very important to acknowledge these and have institutional support for these, and not to be too selfish, but we have different movements within our group to pilot different type of approach, such as simultaneous versus sequential interpretation. So make it almost like cultural need, and even if you speak a different language, it's not a staged kind of conversation, but also simultaneous, like a natural conversation. We're piloting that. We also have, Humans Beyond Patients. This is a program where we feel that everyone needs to be heard, no matter what your ethnicity, occupation, or socioeconomic background is. It's sort of like a narrative medicine, and we're hoping to launch this and make it bigger so that we bring the awareness and get people more involved. So yeah, cultural need and the financial need. Coming into the city is very challenging, parking and lodging. Uh, at the moment, not every trial support this type of financial um, support, but I think it's really important to acknowledge this and
Yeah, I
hopefully,
agree. I mean, I think that, one of the things that we need to do a better job on also is figuring out how to make trials more accessible to the community. And it's patients shouldn't have to have the ability to drive in 2 hours for a cycle 1 day 2 PK draw on every single study. We should be able to accommodate patients a little better. One of the, I think, things that we need to work on as a field is how to make trials more patient centric. That touches a lot of the things that you touched on: transportation, cultural values, engaging patients and their families, um, outreach. I mean, we need to find a way to, um, you know, make it easier for patients to participate, not harder. And I wonder if you could talk about some of your outreach strategies, um, that you've had, some of your challenges and some of your um, successes.
sure. Thank you. So outreach, I think most of the large academic centers do have some mandate outreach community program, and we try to really enrich the ethnic and diversity into our clinical trials, because at the end of the day, you and I know this, but just for the audience, when we design trials, it is supposed to really uh, be designed so that it represents the people who will benefit from it. And if you don't include them, basically we don't even know the results. So, that should be always our goal, to really understand and include all the enriched diversity. We reach out to other outside, and we use those systems. I think community partnership is very, very important, and we do have a good media team, and I think UCLA also definitely has it. Provide a referral and digital campaigns; those are really important. Things like this to kind of a webinar and digital campaigns through MPF and reaching out to the community for those who can refer to us will be very important. It's a united front and definitely a partnership.
Yeah, I think partnership with these groups is important. I think also, some of the ideas that have been incorporated into clinical trials, which have been successful, are doing more televisits with patients. I mean, if I have a patient who's doing well on a clinical trial, I don't feel the need to see them necessarily just to check in on a cycle 1-day visit every time. If I don't do that in the real world, why would I need to do it on the trial? So accommodating telehealth visits and having sponsors and the FDA accept that as a sufficient visit is to me important. Even improving consent forms, that consent forms can be done virtually with DocuSign, I mean, is a huge opportunity to save stress and save time and effort, and we've moved very much in that direction. Um, as I'm sure other institutions have. If I have, particularly for pre-screening patients now, I try every single one to not have them come in person to sign a document that means nothing other than permitting them to see if they're eligible based on the biomarker. So we try to reduce the um, stress to the patient and the family and the cost. Let's talk a little bit. Let's shift gears, Dr. Park, to talk a little bit about retention. We want to spend some time talking about the challenges. We all know that there are rules in trials. Some patients are assigned to arms that they are unsatisfied with. Let's be candid. Whether it's a placebo-controlled trial or whether it's a chemotherapy alone arm on a study, and this is an emotional challenge because we hate to see patients unhappy, even if we don't always know if the drug's going to work. We're still there's a bias that the patient's coming there to participate in the clinical trial investigational drug, and so we've had this challenge most recently with these KRAS inhibitors, like we talked about. But what are some of the strategies you use to help uh, increase patient retention? The patients will
Mhm.
stay engaged in the clinical trial. And what are some of
Yeah.
the strategies you've used?
Yeah, it's again very disheartening to see patients enroll with a lot of hope. And we have to, although we do our best, every investigator is doing its best to really explain the equipoise in a stance of the control arm versus the study arm doing better or not. We actually don't know, and that's the primary purpose of that trial. But when patients come in, they have the hope that they'll be getting the drug, and when they don't, it feels almost like they're being abandoned or something, maybe. And then, that huge disconnect and disappointment sometimes manifests into not being able to retain them, and they leave or move on to a different. I even had a patient, we tried our best to even retain providing lodging, transportation, and everything too. But still, it was a very difficult to keep them on the study. And,
Yeah,
and yeah, patient pretty much got the same exact treatment by the local oncologist that
right.
is not that very far away from where I was. And it was very disheartening. But I think it's important to do our best to explain all these things and, try to really avoid any unnecessary wait time, infusion time, and all the others, as you mentioned already, as Dr. Weinberg, you mentioned, parking, driving, lodging, meal reimbursement, those are,
Yeah.
it may seem like a small, but it's not really. Yeah.
No, I agree, and I think that the more we can provide, and the more we reassure patients that this is the best, the better chance we have to keep them engaged. The other thing we try to do in this era is partner with the local providers and local oncologists who are, even if they're not on the trial themselves, we can do some of the blood draws and some of the study requirements without having the patient necessarily be too inconveniently um, uh, inconvenienced. It's
Yeah.
really it's important to keep patients engaged and and obviously to keep all the referring providers engaged as well. Um, I think that there's obviously a difference between phase 1 and phase 3. I think that phase 1 trials tend to be a little more daunting because they require a lot more visits and PK draws, and there's a role for them. And then phase 3 trials, which usually have a placebo control or a control arm, have this retention challenge. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, which is in the United States, this is a unique problem as opposed to in Europe, where they have no trouble enrolling on those kind of trials because that's the only way to access some of these drugs. Um, I guess we'll talk a little bit about efforts to engage minorities and make sure that our trials are reflective of the diverse population, certainly in the United States. You've had some success there, Dr. Park, in your enrollment, I'm told, in New York. What would you advise to, the folks who don't live in New York or LA on how to how to make sure that we're adequately getting a representation of the country on these clinical trials?
It's tough. It needs like a global movement, I think. You know, yeah, I do see that there's a question. I don't know if you're supposed to address this, but there's a question. Are you using patients to help you design these trials? This is one of the answer actually that kind of applies to this. I think getting patient advocate is a very, very important from upfront when we design these trials. And as you mentioned, getting those I'm sorry, informed consent forms as easy as possible and layperson level so that you don't have too many jargon and make sure that everything is communicated well. I think these are all important. You have to almost have to have a strategic plan to get those minority and diverse population in from the get-go and maybe even have a stratification of a quota allotted or something. I think major effort needs to
Yeah.
happen. Otherwise, it will be really enriching for socioeconomically more well-off
I
population.
completely agree. I think that's a really good point to have in mind. A effort in the beginning is critical. Like for example, there are certain patients, right, who are more distrustful of participation in these clinical trials than others. So you have to spend a little more time with those people, right? You have to acknowledge that this is a reality, and that means that we need to spend a little more effort and time versus the patient who's come already well prepared, ready to sign the paperwork. And there shouldn't be a you can do this and one patient cannot do that. So I mean, it's certainly in this day and age critical that we all make an effort to spend. And some patients going to take a little more time in the office to convince that patient that this is the right thing, if it offers equipoise, of course. um
Yeah.
you know, we'll just wrap up in a few minutes. I want to, you're doing some great work and over there with a lot of good drugs. What does success look like to you on a clinical trial? How do you feel that this is a successful trial besides for meeting the endpoints of the
Yeah,
trial, of course?
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is more of a philosophical question, I think, and I'm pretty sure Dr. Weinberg, you share the similar philosophy. You know, it's always the best test of efficacy of a drug is really the time and how long they live. But at the same time, what the quality is really, really important. And, letting them have the chance to go back to their trip and the favorite trips and, hobbies they want to go to and attend their daughter's wedding. I think those are probably the most important, exciting things. So I'm sure you have the same. And I usually share with the approval and the permission with the patient, I usually post their photos of happy time, and that really resonate a lot of what we aim to do, and that really fulfills our purpose. So that's to me is a success, but it's really philosophical. How
Yeah,
about you? I'll hear
no,
from you
I mean,
too.
I agree. I think, I always try to personalize it too. I think that, I go when I talk to a patient about a drug and I say, we don't know for sure if it's going to work, of course, but, you know, If you want to participate in something that's we feel optimistic about scientifically and that will give you some more time, I always find that's a compelling message. And for me, a success is, individualizing what's on a Kaplan-Meier curve, right, to that individual, exactly as you say. Um, so some of the drugs that we're excited about, I think we talked about KRAS inhibitors. We talked about this is a whole new wave for pancreatic cancer. I really feel like, we're in probably the best time, in my view, at least that I've been around, for pancreatic cancer research. We've got different inhibitors, which include KRAS inhibitors, degraders. We've got there's other subsets like PRMT5 inhibitors for MTAP-deleted pancreatic cancer. We've got second generation immunotherapy drugs that are really exciting, like CD73 inhibitors. We've got neoadjuvant approaches. We've got a whole bunch of drugs coming down the pike, antibody drug conjugates that are targeting Claudin 18 or others. So, this is probably the best time we've had in pancreatic cancer. And I really feel, and I know you agree because we've chatted about this, that 2 years from now, we'll be looking at this with a totally different way of looking at pancreatic cancer. We're trying to move off of chemotherapy, or at least in a chunk of patients. And especially for you, I'm sure this is exciting time to participate.
I'm getting goosebumps, I'm pretty sure you are too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you'll see a lot of us on the podium and also, a lot of group photos with the happy patients probably in the next 3 to 5 years. I have no doubt.
And our job, right, is to make sure that, number one, as we do these trials, we're doing them efficiently, expeditiously, in a way that the results are going to be interpretable across the entire patient population. And I think that's sort of, one of the messages of these kind of symposium is to, we don't have to wait necessarily for 2 years to put out data. I think those are kind of like the older ways to do things. And in this day and age, as soon as the results are valuable and interpretable scientifically, we should be putting it out. And that's one of the advantages of having all these meetings, is that, the data gets out there sooner, and that we can move on to the next trial. And I think the speed of it is sometimes daunting for patients, but it's also probably the right thing for the field, because ultimately, if we get these drugs approved in the next few years, which is our goal, both inhibitors, vaccines, whatever it is, more patients get access, which is really what it's all about. I think that I'll give you a minute, Dr. Park, the last minute to wrap up, because it's nice and motivating to see young investigators like yourself also engaged and excited about the field.
Absolutely. Such a exciting time. I did not have many fellows before, but this is real. Now I have so many fellows. Those are the young eyes who see the future already and what's happening on on the landscape. So it's a historical moment for everyone, and I'm very happy about current situation, and I would love to continue to do what we do with Dr. Weinberg. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and really want to thank the entire audience for participating. I think, we've seen some questions on the chat, which we've tried to address as best as we can. I really feel like the trials are going to only get better in the years to come. So thank you all for your attention.